myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It's Friday night, which means one thing. That means it's the three amigos. So it's good evening to Mitch and good evening to Steve. Hey, Steve. Good evening, lads.
Good evening, lads.
Good to have you on, and big shout out to newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and landing of for the workplace. Go on, Steve, you've got in, you're in.
All right, I'm nearly there.
More or less in, yeah. Big shout out to the guy. Thanks to them for coming on board and sponsoring StreamYard. As I say, every little helps for us when we're doing this for free. qtechshop.co.uk as well, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, amongst other things, and also the guys who make our t-shirts, which are on sale at newcastlelegends.com. So big shout out to the sponsors. Thank you very much for having us, lads. Always a pleasure to have you on. Slightly shorter show tonight, obviously because of Newcastle's imminent fixture against Southampton away, and we'll be doing a match day live. So we start off with the takeover, I suppose, and we're not talking Newcastle's takeover, Mitch. We're talking Derby Counties, which seems to have gone through no problem with the EFL, and some rather familiar faces seem to be involved.
Indeed. I knew that BZG were talking to a couple of English clubs, actually. So I knew there was continued interest. And it looks like it's going to sail through, which sort of, I think, immediately erases some of the credibility doubts that certain people had, particularly about money, intention, with the tire kickers, things like that. If there were all of those, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, I've got a load of personal thoughts on it, which I probably shouldn't go into. I've had a brief chat with Midhat about it, and I've been told to expect to get an invite for one of his famous coffees at some stage in the not too distant future. So I'll find out a little bit more. I dropped him a line just to congratulate him, wish him good luck. It's very frustrating when I think of the amount of work personally that me and Steve put in, and so nearly got them back to the table in February, you know, because I know Midhat in particular was still very keen to come back for Newcastle. This deal is a lot lower key. It's significantly different in terms of numbers. How much of that's due to COVID and them deciding to invest a smaller amount in a purchase? Don't know. I've not really had a chance to thrash that through. I don't know whether he would actually tell us or not, to be fair. I think the way the company was set up, we initially connected with two guys who had a bit of history with Reading. They both dropped out just before the owners and directors tests, which I find significant. But the O&D tests, they've absolutely sailed through. But then again, I suspect there's quite a lot of people who can sail through the AFL's O&D tests, and that just shows you something shockingly different between the AFL and the Premier League, for example. I mean, if you remember, one of the things that was bandied around was that proof of funds was declined. I think perhaps that proof of funds wasn't up to a certain standard that the Premier League would want, but it's quite clear the AFL are quite happy with it. So, and really good luck to them, and let's see what they do. I don't know what their plans are, whether they've got the same level of thought about investing in community, investing in the stature of the club on a worldwide basis. It would be mad if they hadn't, to be fair. I haven't seen how much work they put in the first place for that. And like I say, personally, super frustrating.
Quite a few questions coming in on this. Jose asks, do you think the Bin Zayed takeover at Derby will have any effect on the Newcastle takeover, Mitch?
I tell you the one thing with relation to our situation was, in the minute they knew PIF were involved, the back right off, we can't compete with that. We won't compete with that, and we can't compete with that. And I think if they had an inkling that PIF still were absolutely out of the game, why don't you come back to the table? Why don't you come back in? And so I think that's the relevance to us at the moment is that there's still something rumbling on with PIF, because otherwise, I'm sure, in fact, I think I know that Midhat would have come back with an offer. Would it have been the same offer that PIF had put on the table? Absolutely not. I know that 100%. He was talking about a significantly different figure. That I'm pretty convinced that Mr. Ashley wouldn't have even batted an eye at that. So yeah, I think that's the relevance for us.
It prompts a question that Michael Hurst asks as well, then, Mitch. If we were in the Championship, do you think the deal would have gone through with PIF?
Oh God, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, if Paul Pott was still alive and had an interest in a football club, he'd sail through with the EFL owners and directors tests. It's significantly different, and you've just got to look at some of the people who have been approved by the EFL in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Their owners and directors test is significantly different to the Premier League one. There's no doubt about that.
Question from Adam Watts. What did I have for me tea? Well, obviously slightly delayed today because I had to get something to eat. It's also my daughter's 14th birthday. So we had a combination of Chinese and pizza for tea. So I'm well stuffed, ready for the long night ahead. I'm not going to be finishing until 10 o'clock tonight. So
multicultural buffet, is it?
Multicultural buffet and on
cake as well, I hope, Steve.
On the Dunstan Riviera. That's going to be my 10 o'clock treat after I finally finish match day live. Hopefully eating that, drinking a cup of tea, celebrating 3 points at Southampton. We'll live in hope. What do you make of it all in, Steve, the BZG takeover at Derby?
Very interesting indeed. I don't think it would have gone for Derby County, or if Derby County had been in the Premier League. I think the fact that they're in the EFL is quite significant. That's my first thought. My second thought is, where does this leave Wayne Rooney? You've got an organisation there, with BZG. You've got Wayne Rooney and Derby County that are wrapped up very much in gambling. So that's going to be an interesting little aside and a little shoe in there. They've got a manager who's under pressure, who we've been hearing for a few weeks. His job was on the line. Rooney is Rooney destined to be manager there? Well, he hasn't got the badges, so will somebody else come in alongside him? Is Koku really under the pressure that some in the press are making out? There's a lot of questions, Steve. A lot of questions, as Mitch has said, about how the EFL actually operate and how their owners and directors test, and the evaluation that they do on individuals is prepared and undertaken. And as I say, would it have been Derby if Derby had managed to get in the Premier League? I would presume not, because you often get into a situation once a club's promoted that the owners don't need to go out and find new buyers and new people to come in. A bit like Leeds United at the moment. They seem to be riding high, and all of a sudden they've got an owner who seems quite happy because there's been an awful lot of money put into the club from just being in the Premier League. Yet it was only this time last year that we were hearing that that the price of Leeds United was dropping considerably because of the risk or the fear of the owner that they would remain in the EFL. And I think his fears probably carried on because of COVID. And I think COVID probably saved Leeds United, quite frankly. Obviously, promotion saved them, but COVID saved them in that other respect, because they would have been really, really struggling. And I think that could be an issue as well for Derby County, as it is for a lot of clubs in the Championship and further down the ladder.
Well, we know he was talking to a group in the Middle East, shall we say? Yeah. Even as recently as February, March.
Yeah.
And as the discussions were going on, the price was dropping weekly.
Yeah.
And the buyers were backing away. And the guy, because we know the guy that was conducting some of the talks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. I think when you look at Derby County, Derby in the 70s, obviously Dave Mackay as manager, and they won the league. They had Cloughie there for a spell. All of that, they had a little bit of history, not much of a history, but in recent times, I consider Derby probably on a par with the likes of Reading and clubs like that. They're a nothing club, they're a nobody club. Whether or not that means that they can suddenly, sort of rise from the embers and get promotion this season and be turned into a mighty force, then let's see where it's riding. But if you look at Project Big Picture, you would be sitting there thinking, you know what, do I really want to be part of the Premier League? Because what am I coming into? I'm coming in to be a bit part player, according to Greg Clark of the FA, according to the head of the EFL, the chairman, Mr. Parry, and according to Mr. Hoffman, and partly according to Mr. Masters, although he does seem to be reeling back on a lot of stuff. So it's a really interesting time for football. It's going to be a messy time for football. And the fact that people are coming in wanting to pick off EFL clubs makes me wonder exactly what is going on, Steve.
Yeah, it's a strange situation. Obviously, yesterday there was a little bit of comment from the PIF side of things from Saudi, and some people saying Alan Thompson says it's dead in the water after the statement, but I read it completely differently, Mitch. The way I read it, it was quite encouraging to hear from somebody from Saudi, more or less say that, from their perspective, if they could get back to the table, they would certainly look at it. So again, we've got to take everything that comes out of Saudi with a pinch of salt. You're going to get asked a question and you're going to answer it pretty much the same as the Premier League have had to. It doesn't always mean that that's exactly what is going on or what's happening behind the scenes, does it?
It's very unusual for somebody in that position in Saudi to even answer a question like that. Very unusual. So I do read that like you, that I don't think you would have answered the question so positively if it was properly dead in the water. In fact, I don't think you would have answered the question at all. Because they don't like to admit failure. They don't like to admit defeat. It's not in the psyche out here. It really isn't. And so for me, for him to even entertain the question, I think is quite, from my point of view, without being accused of giving false hope and all that kind of crap that gets chucked around. My understanding of how the mentality is here, you wouldn't have even answered the question or entertained it. And I think it was quite a positive way to answer the question without actually really answering the question.
Yeah, me too. Good evening, Your Life Matters. Good shout out to me pal down there. Hope you're doing well, mate. And Steve, I mean, it was encouraging. Me and Neil aren't reading that wrong, are we? It was a positive statement from Saudi.
Yeah, I took it as I read it positively, because I read it that there's still an interest in football in Saudi Arabia. Still an interest in the Premier League. And there's an interest in if a football club becomes available that they would like to buy it or they would like to get involved. And at the moment, Newcastle United's still available. Mike Ashley's still chugging away in the background, trying to get something done. We've now got a Newcastle United fans consortium who are going to the competition commission to try and do something and to try and push it on. We've got all sorts going on, as I've just mentioned, with Project Big Picture. We've got, we now know fans aren't going to be in the grounds for the foreseeable. So finances are going to be stretched with clubs right across and right through the pyramid. And yet the Saudis are still interested in football. So, as long as there's an interest there, Steve, and they're still flapping, and they're still waving, and they've still got their sights on something. It's let's keep pushing it so that their sights are still in in the eyes of Newcastle United. They're still looking in our direction. That's the way I'm looking at it. I saw a question there, Steve, by the way, about the food bank from Diane. Diane, it's open 5 days a week. I've just checked as we're looking, Monday to Friday, 9 till 4. That's at the centre at Benwell. So if you check out, you can certainly leave donations there from 9 till 4, Monday to Friday. I think what you may have seen is the Church of St. Bede on the West Road, and possibly they're only open a couple of days. But certainly the drop-in centre that we have in Benwell, you'll see on the website, is now open. Carol did confirm that, Carol Rowland, with me in the middle of the week. So,
yeah, okay, that's great, Steve. Thanks for that, mate. I do want to say, with us having over 500 watching at the moment live, that we did launch our big campaign yesterday. Martin Nesbitt came on and spoke very eloquently about the campaign that we're running called Phone a Friend. We're doing it all month. We think it's very important, obviously, with the new lockdown that we're suffering now across the whole of the UK, that it's important just to pick up a friend. And we did get a few of our friends to do a video, and as I say, with over 500 watching, I'm going to give it a play now. So give this a watch. If you haven't seen it, take on the board the message and give a friend a phone call today. And a big thank you to all the ex-players and fighters and former fighters for chipping in, and Neil Jackson from Media Arts for producing that video, and to John from Jab for doing the logos and design for the flyer as usual. But a big initiative, Mitch, something I think we all felt really strongly about, and just nice to be able to do something like that and get it out there. And I think we've had, at the current count on the video, over 43,000 people have watched it and retweeted it and shared it, etc. So the message has got out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talk about reaching out to friends and family. There's a big Newcastle United family out here worldwide. And we demonstrate that by, you're going to be doing the match day show after this. And we've had shows with people in 4 different time zones on at the same time, that Newcastle family. And we are like a family. We'll have our spats, we'll have our fallouts. We've got our little bits of digs at each other and all of that. But at the end of the day, we care about one thing, and one thing just about above all else is about that bloody football club that we all really give our heart and soul for. And so if the Newcastle family kind of get together and support something like this, there's something seriously wrong in the world. And I know what lockdowns are like. Much honestly, you guys think you're going into a lockdown. We had a month here where you could only leave the house with the permission of the police. You had to go online and fill in a form and see if they would let you go and buy a loaf of bread. And I had a month of that with my family in Russell Hamer, and I was stuck here in Dubai with work. And I tell you what, doing things like this with you guys was the kind of thing that kept me totally sane during that. And it's the power of communication. It's the power of being able to reach out and talk and get your frustrations out in that respect. And it's not a failing to do that. It's a strength. And so, do it. Just pick the bloody phone up and do it.
Yeah, good stuff. Question on the screen there from Barry asking about the 2 fans' legal letters to the Premier League. Barry, if you get onto Twitter and follow the guys who are doing it, it's at, and then it's all large capital letters, NCSL 1892. So that's at NCSL 1892, and you'll be able to get all the information from the Newcastle Consortium supporters on there. Obviously they're updating their Twitter feeds on a regular basis, and you'll be able to get all the information you need on there. Steve, just a quick one really from you on the initiative that we've launched this week.
I think it's a great initiative, Steve. It's absolutely brilliant. We all know, we all have friends. We all go out, and I think I put on Twitter that just pick the phone up and just treat it as we do on this show. So yes, chatting to your pal in the pub, because you can talk about anything in the pub. So you can talk about anything on the phone. You can talk about any old crap that you want to. It doesn't have to be ringing up for a specific reason. You're just ringing up for a chat, and you'll just see how it goes and how it flows for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes that you're going to be chatting away, listening as well as talking, listening to how your colleagues and how your friends are getting on, and taking a little bit of time, because what else have you got to do? You're stuck in the house, you're watching TV, and if it's anything like our house, you're either having to put up with the Kardashians, or you're having to put up with CNN and what's going on in America with the election. They seem to be the only 2 channels that are on our TV at the moment: the Kardashian chat type channels and the election. So there's a lot more going out there, and we're all worried and we're all concerned. And let's wrap our arms around each other and make those phone calls. You know, it's a great initiative, Steve, and I'm quite proud of you for putting this up and getting it kick-started. And I'm hoping that the rest of the fan groups out there can get behind it as well, and everybody on Twitter and Facebook, and make this something special.
Yep, good stuff. Thanks to everybody for sharing it, and thanks for your kind words, lads. Whilst we're on, we're also doing the final giveaway of a T-shirt, 3 Amigos T-shirt, which has been kindly made by qtechshop.co.uk. As we have done with the previous 2 T-shirts, we are giving this away to the highest bidder. It's now on my Twitter page. It's pinned at the top. So if you join at Steve Wraith on Twitter, you can bid for that. The announcement of the winner will be on Monday Night Show, which is Ladies' Night. And good luck with that. We've made some decent money off that already. I think Daryl, one of my mates from Manchester, donated £60. He didn't even win it. I think we had a situation where 2 people actually thought they'd won the T-shirt last week, and one paid £81, and the other one paid something else, 50 quid for another T-shirt that QTech donated. So we ended up making more money off the second T-shirt than we did on the first, Steve.
Yeah, well, I think what happened was that the person who thought they'd won it, they turned around and went, you know what, it's all right. I'm not bothered if I didn't win it. I'll give you £50 anyway. And I thought that was an absolutely amazing gesture. And I think when John heard it, he went, you know what, I'll send you a T-shirt anyway. That was tremendous, because it wasn't for the get a second T-shirt. It was literally, you know what, I haven't won it, so I'm quite happy to still put 50 quid in, regardless. And then, you know, from the kindness of John, he said, you know, well, I'll send you a T-shirt. I think that's a fantastic gesture, and it was a great gesture by the person who put the bid in, you know. And that to me shows what Newcastle fans have been about since the start of lockdown. And that's why one of the things that we're pushing at the moment that we're missed out on, believe it or not, Steve, because we're not at St James's Park on a match day, has been the advent calendars. You know, we always used to collect advent calendars in November. And so we haven't been able to do that. So what we're hoping is, when the donations come flying in, or our cash, that we can actually do something that way to keep the kids who would normally have benefited from that advent calendar, and they would still have one through the month of December. And I know a lot of people saying that they would still like to donate advent calendars in the way that they would have on match day, just bringing, you know, half a dozen, £1 each. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that people can drop off at the donation station in Benwell at any particular time between those hours that I mentioned earlier, that the station's open on a Monday to a Friday.
Great stuff, mate. Great stuff as always. It's a great initiative, the food bank. So any supports that people can give, please do. Rich asks, Mitch, what do you make about Masters, Parry and Clark being called up to a meeting by the DCMS next Tuesday?
Difficult to know what the DCMS can do. What are they going to say? I expect some rather curt, mealy-mouthed answers to questions which may or may not be probing. It depends on how hard they want to go at them. I mean, it's quite obvious that everybody involved at the top end of the game has been talking in corners for weeks, if not months, and damn everybody else. And that's all about self-preservation. That's all about keeping themselves in significant and prominent positions, in my opinion. And it's all about keeping a status quo where an elite few garner the most benefits out of the game. As I said a couple of times over the last few weeks, the pyramid's built the wrong way around, and it's top heavy, and it's only ever going to fall over the way things are going at the moment. And any kind of pressure that can be put on them to explain themselves is a good thing, in my opinion. Will that come from the MPs? Well, I tell you what, if Ian's there, it will. But will we have the right people asking those questions with the right neutral agenda, shall we say? Because it seems apparent that if the lower league clubs had got any money out of the deal, Parry would have been seen as some sort of saviour by many of them, because below the Championship and below They're desperate for any cash, and so we're approaching the time on the timeline that we have had suggested to her a few times before, where we're going to see the first of the English Football League start to cave in the next couple of weeks. And I genuinely take no pleasure in saying that, and I genuinely hope that that doesn't happen. But that's the way it's headed at the moment, and these guys need to explain themselves, because they're not doing it for the good of the game. They're not doing it for the good of, your Mansfields and your Stevenages and they're doing it for themselves, to keep themselves in the corridors of power, to keep themselves at a level where they can maintain their own personal interest. And that's how so many people in football act. And it's time that that stops. Yeah,
very, very true. What did you make of it, Steve?
It's really interesting. I pulled out some little facts about it. You're saying it depends on who asks the questions and what the questions ask. All they've got to do is pick up the Guardian. On the 13th of October, Greg Clark, it was reported that Greg Clark, who's the chairman of the Football Association, has emphatically criticised Project Big Picture and the proposals that have been developed by Manchester United, and he described it as a grab for power and wealth. That was reported by David Conn on the 13th of October. On the 28th of October, David Conn wrote, Greg Clark has surrendered the FA's moral authority to lead football, and actually states that when he manoeuvred into the space left by Scudamore's departure from the Premier League, and at that point started Operation Big Picture. So according to David Conn, the man who's emphatically came out with a statement on the 13th that Operation Big Picture is a grab, turns out that he was the man who orchestrated it. He was the man who set it up when Scudamore left the Premier League. So it's there. It's in black and white in the Guardian. You just got to read it. So that was the 28th. Then you've got another twist that came out yesterday with David Conrad's FA chairman Greg Clark supported the push by the big clubs to control the TV deals. So not only has he set up Operation Big Picture, not only has he gone behind the backs of an awful lot of football clubs, both in the EFL and in the Premier League, but he's actually done something here, and according to David Conn, that would have basically handed over the majority of TV money to the top six. The top six who have been convinced that they are something better. The top six who want to cream off all the foreign TV channel money. Ironically, the TV channel money that would have come from the likes of BN Sports. Now, this is the sort of questioning that I'm hoping forensically the likes of Ian and other MPs who are part of that committee will be starting to pin Greg Clark down on, and an awful lot more, Steve, because this shows that behind closed doors deals are done in the Premier League, in the EFL, and in the Football Association continuously, not for the betterment of the game, but for the betterment of individual clubs and individual people within the game. That's what this is about. It's a power grab, not just by Greg Clark, but also by Parry, and also by Hoffman, and potentially by Marsters, although Marsters has tried to keep himself out of it by turning around, really saying the same thing as Clark said right at the very beginning, that this is shocking, this is a power grab. He stuck to that script. Clark's been proved by the likes of David Conn that it's a much, much bigger script, and there's a much, much bigger goings on. So that is where the hub of an awful lot of the issues that football is now encountering are coming from. And that's why the EFL haven't been given the backing by the Premier League yet. That's why certain clubs in the EFL, as Mitch says, could well be going out of business, because no matter what really needs to happen, there are people taking advantage of the situation that's cropped up with COVID, and they're saying, you know what, this is a great opportunity for us, a great opportunity for the six. And when you looked at what they wanted to do with Project Big Picture, there was actually going to be 9 clubs, of which 6 could decide on what happens to the 20 or the 18 that would have been in the league. dear me, it's who would vote for something like that? Who would even have the audacity to suggest something like that, other than someone with the mentality of a Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
This was the perfect opportunity for the FA to step in and show that they're the bastion of the game in England.
Absolutely.
To reset the balance, to take back power, and instead you've got the chairman of the FA colluding with it all and giving even more of the power away. And that's the most shocking thing about it all. The FA should be the bottom line.
Yeah, he has paid on his golden share. The golden share that the FA had, which could have wiped out anything that was suggested by the Premier League. He's paid all over it. Absolutely.
He's wiped his arse with it first.
Well, he did, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's flabbergasting. Absolutely flabbergasting. And as I say, to have the audacity to then have the situation that we know happened months and months ago regarding Newcastle United, and they couldn't make a decision to save their life about whether or not Newcastle United could be owned by a public investment fund from Saudi Arabia. Yet they could be sitting there making decisions that would have helped themselves and suited themselves, that would have helped their little ivory towers get taller and taller, and their empires get bigger and bigger, or at least the empires of 6 of their members, of which they would be getting a spin-off from. This is the corruption that's been spoken about in football, with a small c. Nobody's willing to turn around because nobody has had the guts to do it. We're seeing people like Gary Neville suddenly coming out with stuff, but Gary Neville's now sitting on a panel with the FA alongside Greg Clark, talking about what should happen for the good of the game. And this is the Greg Clark who's been coming out with this crap for the last God knows how many months. It's a scandal, Steve. And that's our MPs, no matter what party they're on, have got to get their heads together, and they've got to really get into the Premier League. They really have to, and they've really got to get into the Football Association. As Mitch says, the Football Association had a great opportunity, but look at the state and the mess that they're making of football. A mess of their own doing, by the way. Not a mess of the fans, a mess of their own doing.
Big happy birthday to Nixie, 60 today. He's blown his stash and he's on the bones of his horse, and I've got him to watch the show. So happy birthday, Big Nixie. Hope you have a good one, mate, and enjoy the rest of your night. You share your birthday the same day as my daughter, who's 14 today, and God, that makes me feel old. There was a question earlier, I think it was from Barry Hogan, Mitch, about Mick Martin's interview in the Chronicle this week. I'm not sure whether he has had time to read it, lads, but
haven't seen it, mate. Haven't seen it.
In a nutshell, he said we should be thankful for Steve Bruce.
Okay. Look, we've talked about this dilemma, and I guess we're in a situation tonight. 3 points tonight sends with third, and so what are we happy with, and what do we class as success in the strangest of seasons and the strangest of times? And again, it boils down to you cannot pull the wool over our eyes. Yes, we've got to be happy. Would you take the position we're in terms of points after this many games and into the quarterfinal of the League Cup? Of course you would. Would have taken that to start the season quite merrily. But the reality is we know what we're watching. But we've got to be prepared to give credit where it's due. What he did in the game against Everton was he finally seemed to get a strategy and a system that had square pegs in square holes, and looked at a team who was missing their 2 best fullbacks, missing their 2 best strikers, and he went for the places that were weak. However, the player who he doesn't seem to know what to do with now seems to be St. Maximin, who, and that's frustrating as hell. But we can't sit and say we're unhappy with the position. We can't sit and say we're unhappy with our progress in the League Cup. You know, because like we said at the time, nobody writes on it, but they nearly lost on penalties to a League Two team on the cup if they win it. But equally, you can't fool with. We know what the Emperor's new clothes look like, and that's the way it feels, you know. And here we are complaining that Darlow and Wilson haven't had England call-ups because, frankly, they both deserve it. If you look at the form of some of the other players that have been picked, if you're going to pick on form, then they're two people who should be involved with the squad at least, you know. And so again, we kind of complain about that, but we can complain about, you know, regularly having games with 30% possession, regularly having games where our only shot on target comes from the penalty spot, regularly has, you know, has our goalkeeper making the most saves of the week and being the busiest player on the pitch. That's all not good. You know, we know what that looks like. The fact that we're doing it in the weirdest of seasons and the weirdest of times, I think it would be very, very different had there been fans in the stadium. We know this. We know all of this. So I can understand why people within the game try to defend Steve Bruce.
Yeah,
I totally understand that.
Mick Martin was obviously at Newcastle in the early 80s, Steve, and you know, he had an illustrious career. You know, he does have a bit of a privileged place up at the ground, I believe. You know, he gets in, sits with Bob Moncur, and that part of one of the old establishment up there, if you like. So, is it just a case of, you know, maybe he's doing a little favour for the PR team at the club? Do you think, or is he being serious?
No, I think he's probably being serious because he's probably looking at the situation where football is, and at the moment, and he's, you know, you think about it and you think, well, you know, we've actually got a manager who's been here now for what, 14, 15 months. We haven't been relegated. We're playing and getting results. Other clubs we've seen last season where the, you know, so-called established coaches, probably, you know, like Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, and they've been relegated. We've seen the situation with crazy owners at Watford who sacked the manager with 2 games to go. We've seen a club who last season were absolutely flying it and are now stuck rock bottom of the Premier League, or 2 clubs that were flying it in Sheffield United and Burnley. So he's probably looking at it from that and thinking, well, you know, that Bruce has steadied the ship, or that he's steadily plodding along because that's what we're doing. And as Mitch says, a result tonight, we could go 3rd or 4th. Hey, you know, credit where credit's due, I suppose. What I saw last week against Everton, I saw a team that suddenly seemed to have a little bit more confidence in themselves. Yes. I saw a team that was a little bit more composed, and a team that seemed a little bit more committed. What we now need to do is to have those happening consistently, and that's the other C word that we're missing. You know, the consistency, that we know that team can play football when it wants to. We know that if it's got a system that it's happy to be playing in. But what we now need is to see that that confidence moving into a bit more transition in terms of the way that they play. You know, that the cohesion between the defence and the midfield, supporting the attackers. What we saw last week, we saw some great support from the midfield coming in. We saw when, for example, Wilson dropped off and picked the ball on the halfway line, that San Maximum was already ploughing through the middle for to be able to get a nice pass through from Wilson to set him up. We saw nice interplay between players in midfield, and we saw the ball pinging around a little bit quicker than we've seen probably all season in patches last week. And it's that consistency that Bruce is now going to have to instill in the team, because we've seen that they can do it. And if they don't perform, then we start to ask the questions again. Well, what happened? You could do it there. You could do it for 20 minutes in that game, 10 minutes. When are we going to see it for half an hour, 45 minutes every half, rather than just like a little bit flash in the pan, which comes over as though the players are either lacking the confidence that they can go out and play that way, or they actually can't play that way. Now, we can't say that they can't play that way because we've seen that they can put performances in. We can see they can put moves in. We can see that they can put string a few passes together. What I want to see now is Bruce being able to take that on to the next level and make them an attacking force, and making them look as though we can actually go, yeah, this is well done. Yeah, we have got something now. Something's working on the training pitch. Something's working behind the scenes, and you've got now not just a squad of players, but you've got a team. You've got team and players working for each other. So maybe it's Mick Martin saying stuff like that or seeing stuff like that. I think we're beyond the need for to have someone in the corridors at St James's Park to be telling us what's going on, and it would be foolish if he did. And I'm hoping that what Mick's saying is because he genuinely believes it, and he feels as though, you know, from his experience as a professional footballer and a pundit, that there is something there that we can hang our hat on with Steve Bruce.
Yeah, okay. Mitch, one for you there from Mark Taylor. He says, what's your thoughts on the Saudis starting up their own sports channels? Maybe the Premier League want to have their hands in that as well as part of the takeover. Is that significant, do you think?
It certainly, again, reflects where they're going and what they were thinking. Because my understanding is the channels that they're putting together will be talking about bidding for rights, not for a region, but for themselves.
Yeah.
And so they're not talking about... They may talk about the concept that was kept being told was that what they wanted to do with the MENA rights was to say we would like to take Saudi, Bahrain, and the UAE, which makes a lot of sense because of the closeness of the three countries. So you know, in terms of a regional bid, that's as big as the region that they, I think, would be prepared or want to take. And I can tell you now, most of it will be done here in Dubai, because most of the Saudi channels are actually based here in Dubai these days, and they broadcast to the whole region. So you know, it's not a big jump to see where they want to go with it, and that was all tied in with plans certainly that I was made or had suggested to me was the way they wanted to do things during the takeover. So does that mean they're sticking to a plan? Don't know, but you cannot really read too much in it. But they've obviously got an idea, and they've obviously got an idea about what they want to do regionally.
Okay. Big thanks to Nick Williams for his donation, $4.99. Thanks, Nick. Makes a big difference. Steve, what's your take on the channels that Saudi have set up? You agree with Mitch?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it's very much looking at the regional thing. But who knows where that grows in 2 or 3 years' time. The thing with the whole of the Middle East is that, you know, and we've said it before, that MENA is really, you know, an organization or an entity that's sort of built on sand. Really, it doesn't have any movement. It doesn't have any structure to it, other than MENA was brought up by the TV and film people back in the 40s. It was a way of them being able to lump all the countries together for subtitles and things like that when Hollywood films came out. You know, it wasn't, and it's probably past its sell-by date, well past its sell-by date, because since the whole broadcasting of and satellites and stuff came in the late 80s. But we're persevering with a plan because it suits the corporations out there, but it doesn't suit the countries, and it doesn't suit the people within the countries. And I think that although we talk about globalization, I think countries are becoming more insular, and countries are wanting control of their own broadcasting, and they're wanting control of what their people are watching or what they can offer their people to watch. And they don't want that to be picked off by someone in another country in exactly the same way as we would be if it was, you know, the BBC was suddenly bought by, you know, German TV or Canal Plus in France or RTE. there would be an uproar if that happened, you know. So we want to be we kind of want everything now, don't we? As sort of consumers of sport, we want everything, but there's so many people out there that also want to have their piece of the action, if you like, and I can understand why you wouldn't want to go with someone who has the rights to 28 or 30 different countries if your country was rich enough or had the technology and the infrastructure to do it themselves and not rely on somebody else for what they're pumping in. So I think it's very much that, and it fits. It fits with the way Saudi needs to develop itself over the next 30 years. I think we've mentioned it many times that, you know, something like 70% of the people who live in Saudi are under the age of 30. You know,
Absolutely.
There's a huge change. There's a huge sea change in where the country is heading and what it's doing for its people, you know, and where it should be for the younger people.
And there's a big thirst to get them involved in sport and get them interested in sport.
Absolutely.
From a health perspective as well, because I mean, you know, this region is one of the diabetes capitals of the world, and Saudi recognise that getting young people involved in sport is one of the ways to improve their health and their general well-being. There's a good lad out here, like an American lad called Ross Christ, who does a lot of stuff on the radio. Is just taking a job working with the Saudi government to get people interested in sport. I think he's a former tennis pro, amongst other things. Lovely lad. And you know, that kind of initiative, countrywide, you can see why they want interest in sports. You can see why they want interest in the television rights that go with sports. You look at their investment in Formula One now. Saudi Aramco is everywhere, all over Formula One. There's now going to be a Saudi Grand Prix. Notice not the furore that we had at all. But on the same vein, I can remember Alan Jones winning a Formula One title in the early 80s with Fly Saudi written all over his car. So the Saudi money's always been there in one way, form or another, because it revolves around oil and petrol.
Yeah, the other thing is, if you get people watching sport, you get people participating in sport.
Absolutely,
and that's what he's trying to do. That's what your pal is going to be involved in. He's going to be encouraging the younger people to get involved in sport. And then that means that sporting clubs in Saudi will come around and in competition with other countries, and their sport, their young people and their sportsmen will be able to compete because the competition gets bigger and greater and stronger within their own confines, within their own country. So it's a long-term plan for to see the benefits of sport. And I'm trying to move away from the whole buying Newcastle United situation for Saudi, because that's a totally different conversation. What we're talking about is actual young people and people in a country that haven't had the opportunity to try out some sports, who might be very, very good at it, having the opportunity to do exactly that, whether it's basketball, football, rugby.
If you look at how a lot of the sports clubs in this region are run, they're multi-sports associated with a single club. So you go to Al Ahly, Al Shabab club, they're not just a football team, they're a basketball team, there's a volleyball team, there's, you know, there's all the different associated sports there. And regionally, you know, in UAE, in Saudi, in Qatar, in Bahrain, that's how all the clubs are organised. It's the football club tends to be the pinnacle of the club because that's the big sport in the region. You know, if you look at what the Saudi football clubs are doing at the minute, they're definitely getting a push on to compete in the Asian Champions League and to compete with the clubs in China, who seem to have more money at the moment, but the historically better clubs in Asia, which tend to be Korean and Japanese. The push seems to be to aim for all of those. But the success at the football club tends to generate success at the rest of the club with the other sports. If you look at what Roy Caviani does in Doha with Al Arabi Club there, he seems to be posing with another bloody trophy every 5 minutes on Instagram, because the club that he works for are doing exceptionally well, and it starts with the football club, but then that success trickles down through the club, and it gets so many people involved. If you look sort of in the evening after schools, the amount of minibuses that rock around the streets in Dubai, which have got the sports club's logos on, and they're taking kids to go and participate in stuff here, there, and everywhere. And it's very well organised, and I suspect Saudi again have looked at what the clubs here do and gone, we need to be doing some of that, because that's the way to get our young people active, and that's the way to get our young people involved in sport. Whether it's football, basketball, volleyball, netball, whatever. And the television rights go hand in hand with that, because, like Steve says quite rightly, you get people watching the sport, they're going to go out and want to do the sport. They're going to go out and want to be the people that they enjoy watching, because that's where it all starts with us.
Yeah. Didn't Sir John Hall want to do that?
Absolutely, that was his vision. Get the basketball club, get the rugby club together, and be a sporting club. It works. It works in Spain with Barcelona and Real Madrid. Their basketball clubs are bloody good. Turkey do the same as well. The Turkish clubs are all layered with clubs within clubs, and they all feed into the football club as the pinnacle of it all.
Yeah, Greece, and then the former Yugoslavian countries as well.
Yes.
Really big in all of that. And not only that, but like you go and you support Panathinaikos Football Club, you also support the basketball club, and you also support the volleyball club and the beach volleyball club, and so it goes on. That's the way that that's the way that the interest gets, and people find a little slot that suits them in a sport that they can participate in, or a sport that they like to go to watch. It's common sense. It's human nature that as you say, you'll want to try it. And I think what's interesting as well about Saudi is whether or not that spins out to women's game and the young girls, and whether they get
it will now
important game, and where it moves, because that's I'm sure the Saudis will be looking at it and going, you know what, women's football's growing, women's football's starting to come up. This is a good time to get in, because it's an opportunity for us to develop something different and
look, the changes in Saudi are significant. I mean, I was talking to a patient of mine whose family own the Porsche and Audi dealerships for most of Saudi, and since they've allowed women to drive, he says that one, they've had to employ more female staff, and some of them at front of house, and two, it's quite significant how women are now making the car choices, and women are making the decisions, and coming in with their blokes and saying, no, I want that one, and he says that the change is palpable.
Yeah,
and so as they now push, they've now got a female sports minister, or sports ambassador rather, and so that push to get women involved, and that'll come through the clubs, and this club structure. It will come through that structure, no doubt. That you get the young girls involved, and get them and let them express themselves in a way that they've not had an opportunity to do so before.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You talk about the choice of cars, and it reminds me of what we witnessed when I was over there just a few months ago, Mitch, when the young girl pulled up in the Porsche Cayenne, and she got out the car with all the shopping and the 3 or 4 kids. And the guy from the apartment block came out to help her. And then about 30 seconds later, the husband pulled up behind in the Ferrari. He's traveling in the Ferrari. She's traveling in the Porsche Cayenne. She's got all the shopping, because he can't get anything in the Ferrari, can he? He can barely get himself. And he's struggling to get out of it as well, by the way. But yeah, you're right. It's something that has to be seen to be believed. And I can imagine that particular guy in the showroom. He must rub his hands with glee, because if he's got something that the lady wants, then she'll get that car, no question.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Got a couple of minutes to go before we hear the teams announced for tonight's game. I just want to quickly touch on pay-per-view, Mitch. Looks like the Premier League are going to have to. They're going to have to do a Boris on Monday and do a U-turn.
Yep. And that shows finally that ultimately the people who can make a difference and have a bit of power in this game is still us. It's still the fans. Now, when the fans unite behind something, when the fans of all the clubs pick up on a great idea, like charity not pay-per-view, the game's authorities and the club shit themselves. Yeah. Because we're still ultimately the people that always come back to as well. When a club goes out of business, who helps with the Phoenix Club or who helps sort out the debt? It's usually fans putting their hands in their pockets, turning up, doing stuff for free, turning up and paying this and donating that. You know, the three sets of owners of Leeds pretty much did it with their club. 2 sets of owners with Portsmouth did it with their club, and the list goes on and on and on. Because ultimately we're the people that they'll always fall back to. And so to see us be able to organise, to be able to get behind something, to put what are at times petty rivalries aside, both within fan bases, because we're not the only club that has schisms within the fan base. It's something that's common throughout other clubs as well. But when you find an issue that genuinely matters, it's great to see the football family come together. To use a term I don't particularly like, but you know that's what it is. Is that everybody just turned around and went, "Get lost." No, not doing that. But because we've got the ability to use technology such as streaming services, which legally or illegally, that's a different matter. The fact that people can easily give them the power to turn around and say, "No, I'm keeping your money. I'm going to put my money to some other use." And again, it comes back to the way they try to excuse themselves as a group of clubs and as a group of organisations. This round robin pointing of fingers, where the league blames the television companies blame the clubs, and the clubs blame the league. And so everybody just stands and points the fingers in any other direction, and nobody takes accountability for it. Well, we got to the point where somebody had to take accountability for it because the fans made them. And that's fabulous.
Yeah, it was a good win for supporters, Steve.
Yeah, great win. Absolutely great win. And I mean, the fact that it was initiated and kicked off in Newcastle is neither here nor there, but well done to the lads who did start it. And the fact that every Newcastle fan, or vast majority of Newcastle fans, got behind it, and then it quickly took off, and as Mitch says, went worldwide, well, countrywide, and we ended up with all 20 clubs and their fans in the Premier League, really putting the pressure on. And I presume those bangers and fireworks I'm hearing outside of my house are because Danny Ings isn't playing. Is that right? Have we heard anything yet, Steve?
Nothing on the Southampton team yet, but it'll be coming in the next couple of minutes. So as soon as I find out, I'll hear you. I'll let you know. But obviously, as you can see on the screen there, unchanged team for Newcastle. Does that surprise you, Steve?
Yes and no. Yes, I thought that they may have gone horses for courses and looked at the opposition and maybe he's tried to tighten up in one or two areas, but again, he feels as though that the team played confident enough, and he's confident enough in that performance last week, as we've said earlier, to just go out with an unchanged team. I think there was a lot of question whether Fraser would come in. There was some people thought that we might have seen Hayden come back for Hendricks, but I thought, Hendricks takes a bit of stick. I don't know why, but I thought he had a good steady performance last week. The question is, can that lineup repeat what they've done? That's the key for it, Steve.
Che Adams and Theo Walcott up front for Southampton tonight. So the stories about Danny Ings were true. He is not playing today, but they're not a one-man team. James Ward-Prowse in there can do some damage. The captain of Southampton, of course, still got plenty of players there that can cause Newcastle a few issues. So it'll be interesting to see, how it goes. Is it a surprise for you, Mitch, that the lineup's unchanged, or do you think they deserved it after that win last week?
Well, I think you both know my feelings on you worry about your own team, and if you've had a good win, there's no reason to change the lineup if everybody knows what they're doing and everybody's got their understanding of the system they're playing at. Why change it? I know there's a few ifs there, but you just never seem to know with Steve Bruce about what he's going to do. That's another problem. That with the amount of times you'll see a team change, and it looks like it's quite random. So to see an unchanged team is quite refreshing. I feel a little sorry for Fraser because I think he's done quite a lot in the last few games when he's come on as a sub to deserve some inclusion in the team. But where does he fit in that system? If you're going to play that system, it feels like it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all three of St. Maximin, Fraser and Almiron. There's going to be one of them miss out.
Looks like he's injured there, Mitch. If the lineup in the substitutes is correct, because he's not made the bench, so he must be in carried injury. Maybe that's had a response from him in deciding to keep the team steady, and he's brought Matty in for him, judging by what Steve put up on the screen there, which is interesting. There's the other one, no Joe Linton.
Well, he's on the bench. He is on the bench.
Yeah, aye. But I think. We dispelled that little piece that we've hung on to, haven't we, Steve? You know what? I think what he's probably doing is he's just stretching out those 10 games for you. He's just trying to make it more and more difficult for you.
So yeah, on the bench we've got Gillespie, Clark, Longstaff, Matty Longstaff, Andy Carroll, Joe Linton, Hayden, and Manquillo. So pretty much the same old story on the bench as well. Which with the exception of Fraser, who Dave Harrison did say earlier had heard from the Chronicle that Fraser might not make the squad tonight due to injury. So hopefully that's not too much of a setback for Fraser, and he can get back to doing what he does best. Because we had spoken a bit earlier on the show this week about potentially, bringing him in instead of St. Maximin, that potentially it might be time to, maybe give St. Maximin a rest because he's looked a little bit jaded, Mitch.
Yeah, and he seems to be given this free role, which you would hope he would excel in, but he just hasn't seemed to have clicked. And in the last game, he took a little bit of a knee to the thigh, and he almost looked like he just gave up for a little bit. He was flat, So again, you would hope a player like that, if you just say to him, "Get the ball and play, mate. Do what you're best at." But he almost looks hesitant to do that. I don't know whether he's still suffering a little bit from that being taken apart by that Lampetti at Brighton, and whether he's dwelling on a few things, because he gave the penalty away and he had a bit of a torrid game, because he's the kind of player that I guess is a confidence player. Again, come back to Bob Paisley, you either need a kick or a cuddle. I think he's one that definitely needs a cuddle. But that would fit with the profile, and that's fine if that's what somebody's like, I'd love to see him explode in a game. Just do something magical, because we know he can.
Yeah,
you absolutely know he can. If he gets the ball at his feet and he's in the mood, I don't think there's anybody can live with him.
No, definitely not. Good to see Matty Longstaff back as well, Steve, on the bench anyway. He's, creeping back into Steve Bruce's plans, and it's had a lot of fans scratching their head as to why he hasn't been, in and around the first team a bit more. Obviously, he was carrying a little bit of a knock at the start of the season, but he's quite clearly on the comeback trail now. Yeah,
absolutely, and it is good to see that he's on the bench, and there's opportunities will crop up in the next few months for him, because a fit Matty Longstaff is definitely a big plus for Newcastle United. I think when you look at also the San Maximum situation, I think what we saw when Fraser came on was that Fraser does look as though he has that sort of telepathic vision that's needed and that benefits Wilson. You know, there seem to be a decent partnership, and I'm hoping that we can start to, you know, if Wilson's making the spaces that San Maximum can exploit those spaces that Wilson's created, but also when San Maximum's breaking, that he has the opportunity to lift his head and actually see where Wilson is in the box, because that's what we see from Fraser. He's got that ability to just look up before he plays the pass, and sometimes, you know, San Maximum's beaten 3 or 4 or 5 players, and then he'll stick across, and then he look up and see where the ball's gone, you know. So it's part of his game that becomes a bit frustrating. And I think once he gets into an opportunity, yeah, he takes a shot, and that's good. And I think that also we're hoping that we're seeing a fresh and rejuvenated Almiron, because again, there's a player with, you know, bags of talent, bags of skill. And he's like a whippet, isn't he? He's so quick. Right. And it's whether or not that either of those, either San Maximum or Almiron, can strike up a partnership like Wilson has, like Fraser has with Wilson, then that would be a massive asset to Steve Bruce moving into the next sort of 4 or 5 games, because that's what he's probably looking for now. He's probably looking for partnerships to start to develop. And I think right the way through from the start of the season, we haven't been seeing that. We haven't seen, you know, none of us have turned around and go, that's a great central midfield too. They work really well. Hendricks and Hayden, or Hendricks and Shelby, or Fraser and Shelby, or whatever it happens to be. We're not hearing that, which is normally you get a midfield two where you get 2 strikers that or a wide man and a striker that just knit together. We haven't had that. And I think with Fraser, we thought we're going to get it. So now's the opportunity for either San Maximum or Almiron to take on that sort of that little role of being the person that can knit that together and bring something out of both players, themselves and Wilson. Because Wilson, we've seen that he's the type of striker who works really, really well when he's got the support. But he's also very, very intelligent. His movement's fantastic in the box. So that's when Almiron and San Maximum really need to read his game and to play those passes that he deserves and he desires, because when he gets into those positions, he's absolutely useless and a waste of space when he's stuck. And I don't mean that disparagingly, but in terms of a team, when we play him so isolated, so we've got to get up there and support him. He's a centre forward that needs support. And he can bring other people into the game as well. So use his strengths and use his ability and use his movement, and hopefully that's the thing. Maybe that's what, you know, going back to one of the earlier questions, maybe that's what Mick Martin's thinking when he's talking about what Steve Bruce is trying to do, and maybe he's thinking that that's where it's going to come. That we know that well, I feel as though that's what one of the problem areas is, and just getting those players to knit together and start to see some shape and some pattern and some consistency from them, you know, in a partnership development, Steve.
Yeah, I would agree. It's going to be interesting to see how things do develop. You know, the one thing I think most of us agreed on this show is that, you know, getting rid of Steve Bruce, even when we weren't, you know, getting the results, wasn't an option, because who is going to come in with a potential takeover, you know, hanging over us. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Mick Martin, his opinions as valid as everybody else's. We can all have different opinions. At the end of the day, he just wants to see the best for Newcastle. I know Mick's a big Newcastle fan. He's another one of those players who came to the area and never moved away. You know, he loves the area. So yeah, the T-shirt, by the way, that we've got up, as I say, it's the Final 3 Amigos T-shirt, which all proceeds go to the food bank, is on my Twitter, at Steve Wraith. It's pinned to the top. Get your bids in. It's up to £31 already. All proceeds go to the food bank, and we'll be announcing the winner of that on Monday night. I do like to say happy birthday to players if we've got any who celebrate on the day that we do shows, and it's Kevin Carr's birthday today. Kevin, of course, fantastic servant of the club in the 1980s, part of the wonderful 1983-84 promotion season winning squad, holds a record for the most clean sheets as a goalkeeper at Newcastle United. I think he saved quite a few penalties as well. He ended up becoming a Bobby on the beat in Newcastle before retiring. And Kevin has been on the show. If you check the playlist and look for NUFC 1980s players, there's a cracking interview on there that I did with Kevin during the last lockdown. So give it a watch during your spare time. Happy birthday as well to the man with the hairband, Daniel Cordoni. Celebrating today as well. Not quite as a greater servant of the club as Kevin Carr was, but nonetheless he pulled on the black and white, and he had a few decent games. As I so often do, I do manage to do a pre-record every now and then, which gives me a chance to have a day off, which I'm going to have tomorrow. But I've done a cracking show, which will be on at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Me and Gibbo chewed the fat about the Fairs Cup. And we're doing an hour-long special tomorrow night where we look back at that wonderful cup run and the final and Gibbo's own experiences from that particular period in time. And yes, that is me on the other side holding the infamous trophy, the Fairs Cup trophy, which was brought to St James's Park for a charity event a few years back, and great opportunity for me to get a hold of that trophy. But yeah, all I'll say is on that program I don't do a great deal of talking because Gibbo is just fantastic to listen to, and his memories and his stories about that particular era are absolutely brilliant. So even if you're too young to remember the Fairs Cup, please give it a listen. It's the last trophy we won in 1969, and that program is excellent.
When Gibbo gets started on stories from that era, he's box office. Yeah. Absolute box office. The two things I love hearing Gibbo go on about is the Fairs Cup and Gaza. His Gaza stories I could listen to, even the ones I've heard many times that I still could listen to over and over and over again. You know, I was lucky enough to go on some of the trips with the lads from the Fairs Club who kept in touch with the ex-players, and some of those trips were fantastic. The players just their love for Newcastle United still shines through. No matter where they are in the country or the world, they still absolutely adore Newcastle United and the feeling that they felt. And they still can't believe that they're the last team to have actually won anything for. And it's so yeah. I would highly recommended viewing, particularly if Gibbo's on top form.
Oh, I mean, there's no doubt about it. And from my perspective, just to sit and listen to him talk about things, and I give him plenty of advance warning. So he's, he had his notes down there, and just brilliant. Some stories I hadn't even heard. I mean, you pick up bits and bobs and hear things. And I've known Gibbo for so long that you often hear the stories anyway. And I've been to a lot of these Fairs Cup dues as well, so obviously heard a lot of the stories. But there was one or two I hadn't heard, and yeah, it makes for compulsive viewing, just over an hour long tomorrow night. So we do cover every single game, and of course the infamous final. And there's a few little stories after that as well. So it's good. But yeah, Steve, I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? Still, and Gibbo says it on the program. From his perspective, he says, I'm looking forward to seeing Newcastle do it again one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember. I mean, my dad was wrapped up in that Fairs Cup team. And he went to all the home games. He went to the semi-final, first leg up at Glasgow Rangers. He was a teacher, but they managed to. Well, they tried to convince the head that they needed to leave school a little bit earlier because they were driving up. I think they wanted to leave early because they wanted to drive up and then go to the pub. But I think the head was a little bit awkward, so he wouldn't let them. He wouldn't let them out quick enough, So the bunch of them piled into the car, and they managed to get to Glasgow in time for kickoff. And then I remember him the next morning, saying what happened, and it was just it was 0-0. And the idea that he had gone all the way up there for a 0-0 draw. But I remember him going on about the penalty save by Willie McFall. And then, of course, they came back. And again, I mean, I was too young. There was no way, after having been to Glasgow and seeing what went on up there, there was no way I was ever going to be taken with him to the semi-final second leg. I must admit, there was no way my mother was going to let him, and I think she was vindicated when he came back in that night, and my mum related the story, and it was always the story that she put out to try and stop us from going to football. Was that he was standing in the Gallagher end, and all of a sudden the lad in front of him just got hit right in the forehead with a bottle that flew over from the Glasgow Rangers fans, and it caught him right in the forehead, and he dropped like a stone. And my mother says, I remember my dad he got that far in the story. My mother says, "Well, what happened to the bloke?" And my dad just said, "Oh, well, luckily the lad next to him had a hanky, so he just put it over his head and just left him lying because they were concentrating on whatever was going on." But it was things like that, that particular game, and that all those previous ones that we had, were fantastic. It must have been something special to be a Newcastle fan, to suddenly find yourself playing clubs, foreign clubs, Setúbal and people like that. Now I was lucky. I mean, I went to a couple of games, and the one that always took my mind was '77 when we played Bastia, and it was Johnny Rep, the great Dutch player, and he absolutely tore Newcastle apart in that home game. And I just remember the next day at school, as a 17-year-old who had been wrapped up in football, just thinking, what a fantastic player he was. What did we witness last night, And I think we forget what it must have been like, because we see foreign players on TV all the time. We see foreign football. We're talking about, the Saudis earlier on, and their TV rights and stuff like that. But we didn't get a chance, unless you saw them in the flesh. You very rarely saw foreign football on TV, if at all. You might get occasional glimpse of something that happened with Wolverhampton Wanderers because they happened to play in Europe or something like that. But for it to come to Newcastle and actually see people from Portugal and Spain and all over Europe, Holland, and then for actually, as I say, to see the likes of Johnny Rep playing for a French club and absolutely ripping Newcastle apart. It was 1977. It wasn't exactly the best Newcastle team, I must admit, who had scraped into if I remember rightly, scraped into the Fairs Cup again. And I think Richard Dennis was the manager, if I'm honest, because I think it was around about the time of player power, But no, I mean, Mitch is right about Gibbo, though. I mean, when we did the road shows with Gibbo, he travelled everywhere with it. I mean, it cost you a fortune in white wine, but we were willing to sort that out. I must admit, because the stories. And yes, sometimes we had the same story the following week, but we got in the car on the way home. He would tell you so much, and you just. His enthusiasm for Newcastle United just rubs off on you. That's what's important, and that's what probably is sometimes missing. And I'm hoping that when we get back to watching football again, that the young people can get their enthusiasm for Newcastle United back, because that's one of my fears, that when football returns, will football be the same? Will the youngsters have latched on to something else? Will older people have decided that they don't want to risk going? There's all sorts of things and all sorts of questions that spin around in your head, And I know that we all say we're desperate to get back in and see live football, but not at a cost. And that's what worries me about what some of the things that the Premier League are trying to do, forcing the government's hand to get into grounds. Yeah. It's got to be safe. It's got to be right. It's got to be right for everybody, and not done specifically for greed, which is what I think the Premier League are doing. I don't think they've got the fans' best interest in heart, to be perfectly honest, Steve.
No, I would agree. Almost time to finish the show, but not for me. I will be hopping on the next stream at 7:30 tonight to do Match Day Live. Me and all the lads and the lass tonight. Laura's joined us tonight. And yeah, Laura's coming back. She did the very first ladies' night. She has a young family at home, and be good to have Laura on tonight. I'm looking forward to having her on. But yeah, always good to do Match Day live. Come and join us if you want some alternative comedy. We'll be watching the game live and giving our views. And yeah, predictions really from you lads. That's where we'll finish off. Mitch, your prediction for tonight's game, please.
I'm going to be very cheeky and go for a 2-1 win.
Ooh, 2-1 win. Okay, mate. And Steve?
And I've got no idea where that's come from.
I was going to go for a 2-1 win as well. And I know that I know Stewie will be saying 3-1, but I was going to go for a 2-1 win as well. There's some interesting players play at Southampton. I like Ward-Prowse. I think he's a smashing player, but I think you can get caught up in sort of all sorts of midfield battles that probably don't do him justice and can stifle his game. I hope I'm right. I like Vestergaard at the back. I think he potentially could go a long way in the game. But I think, you know, as a Newcastle fan, you're always hoping for a win. I'm going to go for 2-1.
Okay, good stuff, lads. As always, great to have you on. We'll be back to 2 hours next week when we'll have a special guest with us, Mick Edmondson from the Back Page, who sadly had to close with the pandemic lockdown again. So we'll have Mick on. He'll be able to tell us what people can buy for Christmas on his website. And he'll also be regaling us, I'm sure, with many stories of his trips home and away and how he almost played for Newcastle United. So I'm looking forward to having Mick on the show, and I'm sure you'll enjoy him joining us next week. We'll need 2 hours to fit all these stories in.
You know.
And a big shout out to Rob Bailey. I know he watches the show. Mick was telling us about him in the shop this week. I've met Rob before, and good big shout out to you, mate. Thanks for all your support. We're glad the shows are helping you get through this horrendous period that we're all going through. Anyway, I've got quick 5 minutes to go and top me water up. Some people seem to think it's vodka, and maybe even get a slice of my daughter's birthday cake. I'll be back in 5 minutes for the live stream. Yeah, don't forget to phone a friend though. Yeah, and anyone who hasn't seen that, please tune in. I don't think I'll make any apologies for playing us out with the video again. And you enjoy the match, lads. I'll catch up with you next week. Take care.
Take care,
Cheers, lads.